All right, so we're now going to talk about a little bit more about field research. So basically what the book recommends is visiting the salon. Again, my opinion is going in there, getting a service done. And the important thing to remember is that when you're visiting the salon, you want to bring a checklist. Personally, I think that this is a little too, what's a good word for this? It's a little bit over the top. I would never bring in a checklist to the salon. Could you imagine if you walk in there, hey, I'm here to tour your salon? You know, they're gonna think that's a little odd. But if you decide to do that, the checklist is right here in the book. You can print it out. The checklist goes over salon image, professionalism, management, client service, prices, retail, in-salon marketing, and services. And it gives you a salon name and the salon manager. What I would do, and you want to give them a score 1 through 5 on each, 1 being absolutely atrocious and 5 being amazing. So what you could do is on your phone, you can actually do like a table or make like little notes about that. That would probably be the more modern way of doing this, or just keeping good like visual notes. If you see something that really stood out to you in a good way, and if you've seen something that stood out to you in a negative way, obviously write that down. And I know the My Lady book does this for the educator training. For the educator training, when it talks about seeking employment and all that stuff, it tells you to tour like the beauty school or to go in there, and it's like I would never really do that. So it is a little interesting. They also tell you to have a appointment confirmation of when you're going to be meeting them for the interview. So it does get a little interesting. It also tells you some really good life advice. Never burn bridges. So if you visit the salon and you realize that, oh, this really isn't for me, or I might not like this, you don't want to burn that contact. Just keep it open, saying, okay, thank you for letting me tour. I will get back to you. You never want to say, you go through a tour and say, oh, this isn't for me. I don't like this. This is awful. If you say that, that's going to burn bridges. And just so you know, a lot of hairdressers in the area do talk. They may not be friends, but they might be in like a business group or some kind of salon group. I know a lot of trade schools and schools that offer cosmetology do an advisory board, and an advisory board, and here's a good life lesson, is made up of people in the same profession. So if you have an advisory board for, culinary, it'll be restaurant owners and chefs and, things like that. In the cosmetology world, it would be salon owners and potentially workers. If you're part of an advisory board, it's important. You're able to network in the community, build your connections, and you might even find a job that way. So, and you also want to give a thank you note. So if you visit a salon, you want to give them a quick thank you note. Most of the time it's going to be through text. Very few people write letters anymore. Although I will say that if you can actually mail a letter, that would be pretty impressive. I think it would be very heartwarming and thoughtful, and it would make you stand out in a good way. Also know that there's other little forms they have here. When you are going for your job interview, interviews are important. Interviews serve as a way to kind of get your feet wet, make yourself stand out. It's the second part usually in getting in the door. First part is the cover letter resume. You submit that, then you also want to follow up. After you submit your resume, give it about 2 weeks. You want to call and say, hey, I submitted my resume and I just want to see how that was going on. Or no, better way to word this, sorry. Don't ask how it was going. What you want to ask is, I want to follow up to see how everything is coming along. And when you say it like that, that shows that, they're persistent, they want something. What they'll normally say is, oh, I haven't had a chance to look at it. Why don't you come in for an interview? And they'll usually have your resume ready. That's a good way of showing that you're different. Most of the time when people give a resume, they don't call and follow up. Here's a really good piece of advice that my parents taught me. The squeaky wheel gets attention. And if you throw enough stuff on a wall, something has to stick. Same thing goes if you really want a job. Follow up consistently. Start being a pain in the butt. When you do that, that might get you in the door quicker. Another thing that's really important too is, if you do have an appointment for an interview, if you're ever told that they're not currently hiring, don't be discouraged and don't, not do as good as you normally would, because that could be a chance to show off your good skills, and that could be the chance between not getting a job or getting a job. Or if someone at that position, let's say the job doesn't work out and you did good at your interview, they're going to think that, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. I want to hire them. I want to, bring them in. So when you're preparing for your interview, just like everything else, you want to keep a folder. So I always say bring in your portfolio. Your portfolio can include your resume in there too. And bring a folder that you want to stick in there. Your folder should include your social security number, driver's license number, names, addresses, and phone numbers of former employees, And names of phone numbers of the nearest relative not living with you, just in case they need a call. This is typically if they need references, but usually all of this is worked out in your resume. So it's always better to be over prepared than under prepared. You also want to bring in your cosmetology license. When you get your cosmetology license, most of the time your employer will have to make a copy of that. So God forbid State Board comes in there for an inspection, you're not left out in there in their blank. You have to, have up your licenses of who works there and who's licensed to work there. So it's always important to have all those things. Another important thing, because a lot of my students do seek employment, because my program that I teach is a work-ready program, so meaning that a lot of them are encouraged to work early and as soon as possible. When you get your cosmetology permit, if you decide to, or you work while you're in school, your permit is something they also have to have a copy of, and that's another good way. So if you are in cosmetology school and you're getting your feet wet, you can even tell them, hey, I'll have my permit in a few months. That's more important, and you'll actually get real-world experience while getting your cosmetology education in the school. It's also important that your wardrobe is impeccable. Again, most of the time it's a salon and they're not going to make you wear, a suit and tie, although some might. It really depends on the salon and the area. I've gone to interviews dressed very casually for the salon because that's who I am. You also want to know that your position at that salon will have to reflect your wardrobe. If the position is high-end, if it's upscale and you want to dress the part. They also give you an organization on the FYI box. They tell you to look up the Dress for Success charity, dressforsuccess.org. They help people get clean, beautiful clothes in good condition, because it is very difficult for us to afford good uniforms if you are a cosmetology school graduate. Another way to save money is go to Marshall's or TJ Maxx and go in the clearance aisle. The clearance section usually has something you can put together that looks presentable and looks nice for a fraction of the cost. Again, TJ Maxx and Home Goods, it's almost like a yard sale, but you do get a lot of good stuff in there if you know how to mix and match and you really know how to rummage through some good racks. Walmart also has cheap prices as well, and you can also look at your local consignment shops. There's plenty of resources. Also know that for men, they also recommend being mindful of your cologne. For females, be mindful of your perfume. Is it non-existent? I always say it's better to smell like a little bit of cologne than body odor. Also know that for men, they recommend having a properly shaven face or a trimmed beard. Makeup for females. Is your hairstyle current? Nails well groomed? Accessories, are they fashionable and functional? Typically, most of the time, we're not wearing jewelry in the field because jewelry can become hazardous. If you have any metal rings in your finger, that is not compatible with perm services or hair color services. And if you've heard my story before, my cosmetology teacher, she was doing a perm back in the day. The perm got underneath her ring and it reacted. So if you can imagine like all the skin being chemically melted, that's exactly what happened when she tried to take the ring off because of the reaction. Also know supporting materials to bring with your interview is going to be your resume, employment portfolio, and facts and figures. Facts and figures I think is a little dramatic. Most of the time they're just going to ask you a few simple questions and your resume should have that on it. Be prepared for the following questions. Why do you want to work here? What do you like best about your training? Are you punctual and regular in attendance? Will your school director or instructor confirm this? What skills do you feel are your strongest? In which areas do you consider yourself to be the least strong? Are you a team player? Explain. Do you consider yourself flexible? What are your career goals? What days and hours are you available? Are there any obstacles that prevent you from working? Explain. What assets do you have? What computer skills do you have? How would you handle a problem client? That is probably the biggest question they ask, and what they're looking for is someone who is mellow, who does not shut the client down, someone who still lets the client feel heard, and someone who's diplomatic. So let's say if they say this problem client's complaining and cursing, what you want to give an answer like is you want to try to first calm them down, you want to hear their problem first, and what you want to say is this: hey ma'am, how can I help you? I am sorry, I understand what's wrong. What can I do to make it better for you? And then if they, the person says, oh, they keep swearing this and that, then what you want to do is say, I will get you the manager and they can help you. That way you're taking the responsibility off yourself and you're putting it on someone who's in a higher position of power. That should usually always do the trick when you're given that question in an interview. Always be honest about days that you're working. I know that a lot of my students are parents, or they might have some other obligation outside of it, or they might have another job. They understand that. As long as you're transparent first and upfront, that will be better. Also they might ask, how do you feel about retailing? Would you be willing to attend our company's training program? Would you please describe ways that you provide excellent service? What consultation questions might you ask a client? Always set yourself differently here. I'm going to do a video on consultation, but make sure you go in there, like my color consultation videos, go in there and repeat basically a lot of the stuff that I say, or better yet, have your own personal client consultation card and bring it out so you can like add it to their client notes. That usually always leaves an impression on your your interviewer. Also, they might ask, are you prepared to train for a year before you have your own clients? In New Jersey, just a heads up, that usually is not just 1 year, it's about 5 years. I've known people that have been assistants for about 5 years, and then if the salon goes under or they quit or whatever happens, they go to another place, and even though they've been assisting, oh, yep, you're gonna be an assistant again or train with us, or we're gonna show you our way. When that happens, I'm like, oh man. I know you're not supposed to see clients behind the chair at your house, but let's be real, a majority of people have done it at some point, myself included. That's why I think that it's crucial that all states allow some type of booth renting, because you can be the artist that you are and still get your education in, but also, you know, get a chance to grow quicker and grow faster because you're kind of thrown in there. Also, be prepared to perform a service. A lot of salons will require applicants to perform a service in their chosen discipline as part of their interview. Many of the salons require you to bring your own model. Sometimes I actually have my own boss, because she trusted me enough and she saw my YouTube and she saw my work and she was impressed with it. And it was like, okay, I'm here. I'm like, I'm ready. I'm ready to do your haircut, ready to do your hairstyle. We went over products. I went over why I was doing what I was doing. I taught her a few new things. One of them being when I was mixing my hair bleach, the bleaching mixture ratio from the prop set. I said I mix my bleach in a 1-to-1 ratio, because when you do that, and I use a cream bleach because it keeps the bleach wetter longer, which keeps the process going. We also talked about the potential of using high lift, but because she was getting touch-ups done, we decided not to use high lift because it will most likely not lift correctly because color doesn't lift color. And I also explained that, oh, here's some really good retail products. We're gonna clarify your hair first, and that will make sure we have all the junk out of your hair. We're gonna do your root touch-up with a 10-volume developer first to see if that works. If it doesn't work, we'll tweak our formula next time. Things like that are all important. You wanna be precise, be right to the point, speak clearly, and have good conviction and confidence. So they might also require you to bring the necessary supplies and products. I always bring my carrying case everywhere I go. Day of the interview, make sure that nothing occurs that will keep you from getting to the interview on time. Always go there early. If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you're fired. That's a good mantra to remember that the military teaches you. So that is important. You always want to turn off your cell phone. You do not want to come in there with your cell phone blaring during the interview. That is the most embarrassing thing ever. Also, project a warm, friendly smile. Smile is universal language. Have good deportment skills, meaning that's how you sit, how you walk, how you conduct yourself. Good elocution skills. Speak clearly. If you're nervous, don't be afraid to say so. That, oh yeah, I might get a little nervous, so I apologize. You don't want to smoke or chew gum. Gum can be potentially offensive. If you are smoking cigarettes, nothing is worse than them seeing you puff away. And then when you walk in there, your hands reek like it. You go to shake your hands and smoke's like pouring out of your pores. Or even worse, if you have to give them a facial service, could you imagine if you're just done smoking and you put your fingers on their face and your fingers reek like smoke? That's just yucky. You don't want to come to the interview with a cup of coffee, a soft drink, or snacks, or food. I've actually seen someone do that once during an interview that I was interviewing, not for a salon, at the restaurant, and it was so ridiculous. They literally came in with McDonald's, and it was like they were opening the box a little slowly, eating the fry. They kept looking at me, and I actually gave them the stare back. I'm like, this is really happening. They're actually eating a full-on meal. You also don't want to like lean in too closely or, you know, invade someone else's personal space. Try to project a positive first impression. Answer questions honestly. Think about them. If you don't know, be genuine with it. You don't want to ever criticize former employers. Some questions you might consider asking if you're given the chance to ask questions. You generally want to keep your questions limited to a few questions. You don't want to, you know, ask. You want to gauge by their body language. Okay, maybe we should wrap this up. If you don't feel like you have anything to ask, say, oh, that was pretty thorough. If you do have a question to ask, usually do like a clarification one, like can you explain the position more, or what education do you offer? How do they promote themselves? Do we have to promote ourselves on Instagram, or do you have a staff page that we get tagged on? Those are all important things to talk about. You also want to potentially ask about what is your policy on a do not compete clause, which is a non-competition agreement. When you sign that, that basically means that you cannot work in a certain radius for a certain amount of time, depending on your state, because this is a very state-by-state issue. The time might be different, the wording might be different. I know in New Jersey that it's, I think, of 5 years. I have to look into it. But when you sign the do not compete clause, it means you can't work in a radius in any of the salons or have any of the clients come to you after. However, you can probably challenge this law because most clients have social media, and because of freedom of speech, they can contact you and say, okay, like I want to go to you, where are you? And ethically, I would argue that you can see them, because if the client wants to go to you and you treat their hair well, they don't want to go back to the salon. No one really enforces it either, and that's the other thing to be mindful of. These aren't laws that people are going to heavily enforce. I'm sure if you polled anyone on social media or went to the news department, it would easily be shown that people would support the decision of a stylist to see a client, even though they can't with the non-competition clause. So I think that in this day and age, the legality of it could be challenged in a better version because of social media. Also, know in the FYI box, this will be on your test, there are legal questions that your boss cannot ask you. They cannot ask how old you are. They cannot just ask your medical history. They can't ask if you're a US citizen, and they cannot ask your native language. What they could ask is, are you over the age of 18? Are you physically able to perform this job? Are you authorized to work in the United States? And in which language are you fluent? So age or date of birth is not applicable. It's important to ask if the applicant is younger than 18, otherwise it's not relevant. Disabilities or physical traits. The Americans with Disability Act prohibits general inquiries about health problems, disabilities, or medical conditions. Drug use or smoking. Questions regarding drug or tobacco use are permitted. Know that the employer may obtain your consent, so they might ask you to potentially submit to a drug screen. I've yet to see a salon ever do that. Citizenship. Employees are not allowed to discriminate because you are not a US citizen. However, they can request to see a green card or work permit. And know that the non-compete agreement can forbid employees from gathering and keeping client records, including client cell phone numbers. The contract cannot interfere with your right to work, and as a result, these contracts must be very specific and are sometimes controversial. If you are presented with a contract, take the time to read it. If you don't understand it, please consult a labor law attorney before signing it. Always read, and this is another important life lesson, always read something before you ever sign or consent to it. That is a pure life lesson to be aware of. I'm gonna get a quick drink of water. Give me one sec. Sorry about that. I was very thirsty. I've noticed that when I do these videos long term, I get incredibly thirsty. So know that you might be required to complete an additional application. So once you give your resume, you might have to do another application. I found though that most of the time that's not the case. I also found that the application comes before any of this. So most places will just jump to the application. Again, this chapter is just for preparing you for the best. I know it can be outdated, but I'm trying to make this interesting with some additional facts for, real life success. Also know that the activity up here is to have a role play situation, which I think is awesome, where one of you plays the interviewer and then one of them plays the interviewee, and you kind of role play like salon owner interviewing the person. That will prepare you for the interview. Also know that with this chapter, you're able to take the necessary steps when you're employed. So this chapter is all about employing you. So that is that for chapter 30. So we are going to be covering chapter 31 next, and I hope that all of you are ready for me to assess your skills, because we're going to be talking about what it's like on the job, in the field. It is going to get awesome. We're almost there. We have 2 more chapters and we are officially done with this book.